If you're over 50 and you feel behind financially, I'm going to say something that will sound wrong at first, and maybe even offensive. Trying to catch up right now might be the most dangerous financial move you can make. Not because you're lazy, not because you failed, but because the moment you decide you're behind, your brain stops protecting you. Here's what almost no one tells people in their 50s and early 60s. The riskiest years of your financial life are not your 20s or 30s. They're the years when you realize time feels shorter. That's when panic sneaks in quietly. That's when comparison turns toxic. That's when reasonable people start doing unreasonable things. Not out of greed, but out of fear. You don't wake up one morning and decide to blow up your retirement. You wake up thinking, I should be further along than this. You see an article, a chart, a headline about what someone your age should have by now, and suddenly, a perfectly survivable situation feels like an emergency. That's when people abandon patience. That's when they start chasing speed. That's when the phrase, I need to make this work, replaces, I need to survive. And that shift from survival to urgency is where fortunes quietly disappear. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Money doesn't destroy people. Timing does. The market doesn't punish stupidity nearly as harshly as it punishes desperation. The most tragic financial stories are not about people who earned too little. They're about people who earned enough and then decided it wasn't enough fast enough. They weren't reckless for decades. They were reckless for 5 years, and that was enough. What makes this especially cruel is that the desire to catch up feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like you're finally taking control. But often, it's the exact moment control is lost. Today, I'm not going to tell you how to beat the market. I'm not going to give you a shortcut. And I'm definitely not going to promise you a miracle. Instead, I'm going to show you why the instinct to catch up, especially later in life, quietly sabotages the very thing you're trying to protect. And once you see it, you may realize something unsettling. You were never as far behind as you thought, but trying to fix that feeling could make you exactly where you fear ending up. At this stage of life, money anxiety doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from awareness. If you're in your 50s or early 60s, you know enough to be scared. You understand inflation. You understand markets can crash. You understand time is no longer abstract. And that's exactly why bad decisions feel justified now. This is where Charlie Munger's thinking becomes essential. Not because it's clever, but because it's emotionally stabilizing. Munger didn't believe the world rewarded brilliance. He believed it punished avoidable mistakes. Over decades, watching booms, busts, manias, and collapses, he noticed something unsettling. Most financial disasters didn't start with ignorance. They started with pressure. Pressure to match peers. Pressure to fix regret. Pressure to compress time. The American financial system quietly amplifies this pressure after 50 years. Retirement calculators ask for a single number. Media headlines tell you what the average person your age has saved. Planning tools assume smooth markets, stable health, and linear lives. But real life isn't linear. Especially later in the game. By midlife, most people are juggling multiple invisible risks at once. Aging parents, health uncertainty, job volatility, market dependence. Fewer working years left to correct mistakes. So, when someone in this position sees they're behind, the instinct isn't greed. It's fear of running out of options. And fear has a specific financial fingerprint. It makes people abandon strategies that were working, reach outside what they understand, accept risks they would have rejected 10 years earlier. Not because they want more, but because they're terrified of less. Munger understood this deeply. He warned repeatedly that the human brain is not designed to make good decisions under social comparison and time pressure at the same time. That combination short-circuits judgment. It replaces long-term thinking with scoreboard thinking. It replaces probability with hope. It replaces durability with speed. The cruel irony is this: most people who feel behind at this age are not facing catastrophe. They are facing impatience disguised as urgency. They don't need heroics. They need restraint. But restraint is unpopular because it doesn't soothe anxiety immediately. It doesn't create a dramatic turnaround story. It doesn't feel like action. And yet, over a lifetime, restraint is often the highest form of intelligence. The real problem most people face after 50 is not insufficient returns. It's insufficient margin for error. There is less time to recover, less tolerance for drawdowns, less flexibility if something goes wrong, which means the rules quietly change. What worked when time was abundant becomes dangerous when time is scarce. This is why Munger's philosophy matters most now, not earlier, because it's designed to protect people from the one thing that ruins late-stage financial lives: doing something irreversible. The foundation of Charlie Munger's thinking is deceptively simple, and that's why most people miss it. He didn't start with returns. He didn't start with brilliance. He started with survival. Munger believed that the first job of money is not to impress anyone, outperform anyone, or hit a benchmark by a certain birthday. The first job of money is to not go to zero. That sounds almost too basic to matter, until you realize how many financial strategies quietly violate it. Most people think wealth is built by doing something smart. Munger believed wealth is built by not doing something stupid. This difference matters enormously after 50 pusses, because when time is abundant, stupidity can sometimes be corrected. When time is scarce, stupidity becomes permanent. The core principle here is asymmetric risk. Upside is limited by how much you already have. Downside is unlimited by how much you can lose. And the older you get, the more dangerous that asymmetry becomes. Here's the misconception most Americans carry without realizing it: if I'm behind, I need to take more risk. That sounds logical. It feels responsible, and it is completely backward. Risk does not care whether you are ahead or behind. Risk only cares about exposure. When you increase risk late in the game, you are not buying upside. You are selling resilience. Munger spent his life watching people confuse these two. He once said, "The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily." That single sentence quietly dismantles most catch-up strategies. Because aggressive moves late in life don't speed up compounding, they interrupt it. Let's ground this in a clean, original numerical example. Imagine two investors, both 55 years old. Investor A has $600 invested conservatively. Investor B has $300 and feels behind. Investor A earns a steady 5% over the next 15 years. No heroics, no brilliance, just survival. That $600,000 becomes roughly $1. $25 million by age 70. Investor B decides 5% isn't enough. They believe they need 10% to catch up. So they pursue higher risk assets, leveraged funds, speculative growth, complex strategies. Some years they do well, some years they don't. But here's the hidden danger. At some point, there will be a drawdown. Let's say a single major loss of 40%. Now $300,000 becomes $180,000. From there, even earning 10% annually for 15 years only gets them to about $750. Zerozen. They didn't fall behind because returns were low. They fell behind because losses changed the math. Losses late in life are not symmetrical with gains. A 40% loss requires a 67% gain just to break even. And the clock does not pause while you attempt it. This is why Munger was obsessed with avoiding stupidity rather than chasing brilliance. He understood something deeply uncomfortable. The math becomes unforgiving as time compresses. The market does not adjust difficulty based on age. It does not reward effort. It does not compensate for regret. It only compounds what survives. This is why Munger mocked the obsession with average outcomes. Averages assume continuous employment, stable health, no major drawdowns, emotional discipline. But real people don't live average lives. They live lumpy lives. And lumpy lives punish fragile strategies. Here's another misconception that quietly destroys people after 50 pass. Playing it safe means settling. Munger rejected this framing completely. He didn't see safety as timid. He saw it as strategic patience. To him, safety meant positioning yourself so that you could endure boredom, you could endure underperformance, you could endure being wrong temporarily. Most people cannot endure these things, especially when they feel behind. They confuse discomfort with danger. They think, if this feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. In reality, discomfort is often the price of durability. Munger once explained that investing is less about intelligence and more about temperament. And temperament is tested hardest when other people appear to be winning faster than you. That's when the urge to do something becomes overwhelming. But doing something is often the most expensive action available. This foundation, survive first, compound second, explains why Munger avoided leverage, avoided forced timelines, and avoided flashy ideas. He didn't care how fast money grew. He cared how long it stayed alive. And here's the part most people misunderstand. This philosophy is not pessimistic. It's optimistic because it assumes the world will always offer opportunities. If you're still standing, the investor who survives downturns has optionality. The investor who blows up has none. Optionality is the real asset after 50 pauses. Not speed, not bravado, not redemption stories. Optionality. If you preserve capital, you preserve choices. If you preserve choices, time works with you instead of against you. The foundation Munger built everything on was simple but ruthless. Avoid actions that can permanently remove you from the game. Once you violate that rule, no amount of intelligence can save you. Understanding a principle is easy. Living it, especially when emotions are involved, is where most people fail. So let's move from theory into application, because this is where catch-up thinking quietly causes damage. The practical application of Munger's survival-first philosophy is this: you never demand returns from the market. You only accept what is realistically available. Most Americans don't consciously reject this idea. They accidentally override it. Here's how it happens. Someone in their mid to late 50s looks at their savings and thinks, this won't be enough unless it grows faster. So instead of asking, what can this safely become? They ask, what do I need this to become? That single shift rewires decision-making. Now the portfolio is no longer built around probability. It's built around necessity, and necessity is a terrible investor. Let's walk through a clean, fully original scenario. Imagine a 56-year-old engineer named Mark. Mark has $420,000 in retirement accounts, $90,000 in cash, a paid-off car, a stable but not guaranteed job. He plans to retire at 67. Based on conservative assumptions, Mark's portfolio could reasonably earn around 5% annually if invested prudently. At 5% over 11 years, $420,000 grows to roughly $720,000. Add continued contributions and cash reserves, and Mark is on track for a modest but stable retirement. But then Mark reads an article. It says, someone his age should have $5 million saved. Now the math changes, not on paper, but in his head. To reach $1, 5 million, Mark realizes he'd need something closer to 9 to 10% annual returns. And here's where the danger begins. The market is not offering 9% safely, but Mark needs it. So he starts searching. High-yield funds, leveraged ETFs, aggressive growth strategies, alternative investments with glossy pitch decks. Each one solves his emotional problem while quietly creating a mathematical one. Let's say Mark reallocates aggressively and experiences a single major downturn, a 35% loss during a market correction. His $420,000 drops to $273,000. Now his required return doesn't decrease. It increases. To get back on track, he now needs even higher returns, which means even more risk. This is how people enter a risk spiral without realizing it. The market didn't betray Mark. Mark demanded something the market wasn't offering. This is exactly what Munger warned about when he said, "It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid." Easy solutions late in life usually come with hidden fragility. Now let's talk about the mistakes Americans commonly make when trying to force outcomes. Mistake 1. Confusing average with required. Just because an average exists doesn't mean it applies to your life. Averages ignore job stability, health, geography, and personal spending. Mistake 2. Chasing complexity for higher returns. Complex strategies often hide leverage, fees, or behavioral traps. Complexity increases fragility, not resilience. Mistake 3. Abandoning boring assets too early. Steady compounding feels slow until it's gone. Once abandoned, it's rarely replaced by something better. Mistake 4. Ignoring drawdown risk. Late-stage losses change the math permanently. Recovering from losses requires time, the one resource you have less of. Mistake 5. Believing effort can replace probability. Working harder at investing does not increase expected returns. It often increases mistakes. Now, here's the counterintuitive application of Munger's thinking. If the market offers 5%, you take 5%. And you design your life around it. You adjust spending, savings rate, retirement age, expectations. You do not adjust reality to fit a spreadsheet. This is where many people feel insulted. They hear this and think it means settling. In reality, it means regaining control. Because when you accept realistic returns, you remove urgency. When urgency disappears, judgment improves. Munger watched this play out repeatedly in institutions as well as individuals. He noticed that organizations requiring high returns didn't become smarter. They became dishonest with themselves. They assumed optimistic outcomes. They ignored tail risk. They labeled hope as strategy. Eventually, reality collected the bill. The application here is brutally practical. Your job is not to hit a number. Your job is to remain solvent and flexible. Flexibility means you can work an extra year if needed. You can reduce spending temporarily. You can weather market declines without selling. None of those are possible if you force returns. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people resist. Needing less is often more powerful than earning more. Lower fixed costs reduce required returns. Lower required returns reduce risk. Lower risk increases survival. This feedback loop works quietly, but relentlessly. Munger didn't optimize for ego. He optimized for endurance. And endurance, applied consistently, tends to win. Here's where Charlie Munger's thinking separates sharply from conventional retirement advice. Most financial guidance assumes the problem is insufficient effort. Munger understood the real danger was misplaced effort. The advanced insight is this: speed is not the enemy of wealth early in life. Speed becomes lethal when combined with limited time. This is what he referred to, sometimes bluntly, as the catch-up fallacy. The fallacy assumes that if progress was slow before, it must be fast now. But compounding does not respond to urgency. It responds to time and continuity. Munger watched intelligent people abandon their circle of competence, not because they were greedy, but because they were impatient with their own past. They looked backward and tried to correct it by going forward faster. That instinct feels rational. It's also how people walk directly into traps. Here's the non-obvious part most investors miss. Late-stage financial damage rarely comes from one bad decision. It comes from switching strategies midstream. Compounding requires consistency. Switching strategies interrupts it, even if the new strategy looks smarter on paper. Munger often warned that changing horses mid-race is dangerous because it forces you to realize losses while increasing uncertainty. You're no longer compounding, you're resetting. And resets are expensive after 50 passes. Let's talk about contrarian thinking. The conventional view says, take more risk when behind. Seek higher returns to compensate. Be aggressive to make up time. Munger's contrarian view was the opposite. When time shrinks, error tolerance shrinks faster than opportunity. This means your margin for being wrong narrows dramatically. The same investment that's bold at 35 can be catastrophic at 60, not because the asset changed, but because your ability to wait changed. Waiting is the secret weapon most people underestimate. Waiting allows recovery after downturns, optionality when prices fall, psychological distance from noise. But waiting requires capital that isn't borrowed, leveraged, or emotionally earmarked for a deadline. This is why Munger was famously patient, sometimes to the point of being criticized. He was willing to look inactive for long stretches because he understood something most people don't. Activity is not progress. In investing, activity often signals discomfort, not intelligence. Here's a real example from Munger's philosophy, reframed without imitation. He believed that holding cash, when nothing made sense, was not failure. It was preparation. Cash wasn't idle. It was future optionality. Most people hate this idea because it feels like falling behind. But Munger saw it as staying alive. He once emphasized that avoiding stupidity gives you an edge because most people are incapable of sustained restraint. They'd rather make a bad move than sit still and feel left out. Now here's the advanced, uncomfortable insight. The urge to catch up is often an identity crisis, not a financial one. People aren't afraid of poverty. They're afraid of feeling unsuccessful. They're afraid of looking average, admitting they misjudged earlier years, accepting a quieter outcome. Munger saw this as a psychological trap. He believed that self-respect built on comparison is fragile, especially late in life, and fragile psychology leads to fragile portfolios. That's why he famously dismissed envy as not just immoral, but irrational. Envy makes you trade your own scoreboard for someone else's, and once you do that, your decisions no longer serve your life. They serve your ego. Here's the elevated insight Munger left behind. Financial success is not about how fast you grow. It's about how rarely you self-destruct. That framing changes everything. It shifts focus from maximizing upside to minimizing regret, from chasing peaks to avoiding cliffs. People often ask, but what if I miss out? Munger's answer, implied through decades of behavior, was simple. You will miss out on stocks you didn't buy, on businesses that exploded, on trends you didn't understand. Missing out is unavoidable. Blowing up is optional. This is the difference between rich people who stay rich and people who almost made it. The survivors weren't perfect. They were just careful where perfection mattered. They avoided leverage that removed time, complexity that hid risk, speed that eliminated patience. They accepted modest returns, occasional boredom, periods of underperformance, and in exchange, they preserved the one asset that matters most later in life, the ability to wait without panic. That ability is what turns time from an enemy into an ally, and that's the quiet secret sauce behind Munger's philosophy. Not genius, not forecasting, not optimization, just discipline under emotional pressure. Now let's get concrete. Not with slogans, but with actions you can take starting tomorrow. The goal here is not optimization, it's stability under pressure, because after 50,000, the correct strategy is not maximized, it's don't destabilize. Here are the steps that follow directly from Munger's thinking. Step 1. Redefine the finish line. Stop asking, how much should I have by now? Start asking, what does a durable life actually cost me? List your non-negotiables: housing, healthcare, food, insurance, basic lifestyle expenses. Most people are shocked by how modest this number is compared to the imaginary benchmark they've been chasing. When you know the number you truly need, not the number that impresses others, urgency fades, and with less urgency, better decisions follow. Step 2. Lower your required return. Required return is destiny. If your lifestyle needs demand 9% returns, your plan is fragile. If your lifestyle works at 4 to 5%, your plan is resilient. You don't lower required returns by getting smarter at investing. You lower them by reducing fixed expenses, avoiding debt, increasing savings rate modestly, accepting flexibility around timing. This is not surrender. This is engineering. Step 3. Eliminate one-way doors. A one-way financial decision is one that can't be undone. Leverage that forces liquidation. Concentrated bets. Illiquid investments tied to optimistic assumptions. After 50 points, your strategy should avoid these entirely. Ask a simple question before every major decision. If this goes wrong, do I still have choices? If the answer is no, walk away. Step 4. Build for bad years, not good ones. Most plans fail, not because averages were wrong, but because bad years weren't survivable. Stress test your situation. Can you handle a 30 or 40% market decline without selling? Can you live through a multi-year period of low returns? Can you absorb unexpected medical or family costs? If the answer is yes, your plan is strong, even if it's not flashy. Step 5. Accept time as a variable, not a deadline. Retirement is not a switch, it's a range. Working 1 or 2 years longer reduces pressure more than doubling risk ever could. Munger understood this trade intuitively. Time can be traded for safety. Risk cannot. Addressing the common objections. But what if I'm already late? Late is only dangerous if you panic. Steady progress beats reckless acceleration. What if conservative returns aren't enough? Then the solution is adjustment, not aggression. What if I fail anyway? Failure is not underperforming a chart. Failure is losing flexibility. The real win is not retiring early. It's not being forced to work because you took a gamble that didn't pay off. Step 6. Create boredom on purpose. If your financial life feels exciting, it's probably too risky. Boredom is a signal of durability. Munger trusted boredom because boredom doesn't demand decisions under pressure. And decisions under pressure are where damage happens. The final practical truth is this: you don't need to fix the past. You need to protect the future. And protection rarely feels heroic. But it works. When you step back and look at everything we've covered, a quiet pattern emerges. Most financial pain later in life doesn't come from bad luck. It comes from fighting reality instead of designing around it. Charlie Munger's philosophy wasn't about winning some abstract game of wealth. It was about protecting dignity over a long lifetime. He understood that money is not an end goal. It's a tool. And like any tool, it's only useful if it remains intact. When people panic about being behind, they usually focus on numbers. But numbers aren't the real issue. The real issue is fragility. Fragile plans break when markets fall, health changes, jobs disappear, inflation surprises, durable plans bend. And keep going. That's why Munger rejected precision in favor of margin. He believed it was better to be roughly right with room for error than precisely right with none. He once expressed this idea simply: it's wiser to build something that survives many bad outcomes than something that requires everything to go right. That mindset reframes aging completely. Instead of asking, "How do I catch up?" you ask, "How do I stay independent?" Instead of chasing status, you protect freedom. Instead of compressing time, you extend resilience. And when you do that, something unexpected happens. Pressure fades. Decision-making improves. Fear loses its grip. You stop measuring yourself against charts, neighbors, or headlines, and start measuring success by stability, flexibility, and peace of mind. The irony is that this approach often leads to better financial outcomes anyway, not because it's aggressive, but because it avoids the few mistakes that permanently destroy progress. Munger believed that life rewards people who avoid obvious stupidity more reliably than those who chase brilliance. That idea becomes more powerful with age, because later in life, the goal is no longer to prove something. It's to preserve choice. Choice to work or not. Choice to help family. Choice to say no. Choice to live without fear of one bad year undoing everything. That's what money is supposed to buy. Not admiration, not comparison, not speed, just the quiet confidence that tomorrow is manageable. And once you see money through that lens, the urge to catch up loses its power, because you realize something important. You were never racing anyone else. If this way of thinking feels different, that's intentional. Most financial content is designed to excite you. This is designed to steady you. If you're over 50 and you felt pressure to catch up, I hope this helped you step back and breathe for a moment. Because clarity, not urgency, is what protects wealth late in life. If you found value here, consider subscribing. Not for predictions, not for shortcuts, but for clear thinking about money, risk, and long-term independence. In the next video, we'll go deeper into a closely related idea: why avoiding just a few catastrophic mistakes matters more than finding the perfect investment, especially as time compresses. It builds directly on what we discussed today and gives you a practical framework for identifying risks before they become irreversible. Before you go, I'd like to ask you one question, and I genuinely want you to think about it, not answer quickly. What financial decision in your life has brought you the most peace? Not the most money. Was it paying something off? Reducing complexity? Choosing stability over excitement? Leave your answer in the comments. Not to compare, but to reflect. Because the goal here isn't to win a race. It's to build a life where money stops being a source of fear. Thanks for spending this time with me.